It is Sunday, January 10th, 2021. Happy New Year to everyone. This is the PoGo Weekly Digest on PoGoPOC, Politics and Government for People of Color. It has been a very overly exciting and tumultuous week in 2021 to start off the year. And we're going to talk about all of it. The entirety of the show is going to be, of course, dedicated to the insurrection at the U.S. Capitol during Wednesday's certification of President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. But before we get into all of that, we're going to bring in the panel and see how they're doing, how their new year was. Joining me here in the Midwest is Greg, and out on the West Coast is Beacon. Vega is taking the day off. Hello, everyone. How are you? How was your new year?
Well, my new year was great. With a bunch of my roommates watching Bridgerton and playing Among Us. So it was a kind of an interesting range of experiences going from Bridgerton to murder, but it was a lot of fun.
How is Bridgerton, by the way? Like, I hear it's really good, but I don't know.
I enjoyed it a lot. We all enjoyed it a lot. It is very much, it's very much like Jane Austen, Pride and Prejudice mixed with Gossip Girl. And one of my favorite reviews of the show was saying, if you like Pride and Prejudice, but you wish it had more stairway sex, then this is the show for you. And that's accurate. There's a lot of stairway sex. There's a lot of ladder sex. There is a lot of pussy eating, which I very much appreciate. Like, very much supporting men eating pussy. Good for y'all. Take care of your ladies. And it was a lot of fun. So.
If we ever try to monetize, you just like ruined all of that. This video, if we ever go to YouTube and we ever try to monetize, that was the end of it right there. Between the pussy eating and the attack on the Christmas, like it's gonna be over. Greg, how was your New Year's Eve?
It was good. It was good. I spent most of it at home. I stepped out for a moment to go to one of my godchildren's homes to pick up a gift that they had purchased me. But it was good. It was, relaxed, chilled. I probably had spent the last couple New Year's Eves very relaxed, very chilled. There was a point in time in my life where like it was like party, either I'm hosting a party or someone else is hosting a party. And so this year, not being able to party because of COVID, wasn't a huge shift for me, because the last probably 2 to 3 have been really, really low key for me anyway. And so, sitting at home, chilling, cooking, eating, has been a New Year's Eve thing for me for the last few years anyway. So, yeah.
Great. It was relatively quiet for me too. I stayed here at home. Early in the evening, I hosted The Hustle, which was a New Year's Eve virtual event for the Molly House Project, which is a community of boys, men, and masculine of centered trans folk committed to changing the way that they talk about sex work. So it was a fundraising event. It was a really good crowd of people, some really beautiful performances. But after that, I had pizza and watched movies. That was it. It was very quiet, very low key, nothing special. It was good though. It was good. It felt good to not have to worry about where you're going to go or who you're going to see, all that kissing at New Year's or at midnight nonsense. I'm good on all that front. But let's get right into it. So this week it was crazy. So this week was supposed to be eventful. We anticipated that something would happen at the joint session of Congress to certify the Electoral College votes for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And what we anticipated is not what we got. So I'm going to pop up these images on the screen as I talk. so that folks can see what was going on. But on Wednesday, President Trump had a Save America rally. And during this rally, he started inciting all of the people, the thousands of people that were there, to head over to the Capitol and to fight. And they did. They headed over to the United States Capitol building, and they forced their way through several barricades, and got all the way to the steps. They pushed back the Capitol Police, which did not seem to be prepared for this at all. They pushed through several barricades, several security checkpoints, and then they ultimately made it up the stairs to the doors of the Capitol and pushed their way through. For those of you that were watching live, I'm sure you saw the moments on C-SPAN or on whatever news network you were watching where lawmakers that were on the floor of the Senate and on the floor of the House started to scramble because they were being informed that the protesters were inside of the Capitol and that they were deploying tear gas inside of the rotunda. So it got hectic. It got crazy. It took, well, there's going to be several things we talk about, including how the U.S. Capitol Police in many instances are shown and caught on video just letting the protesters in. But then it took over 4 hours for enough action to be taken, the National Guard to be brought in, troopers from Virginia, and all sorts of law enforcement officials from any federal agencies that were available to come over to the U.S. Capitol and to clear it of the protesters. And even that process was really disturbing because there are videos of all of these white terrorists just being let right out. Like in many instances, Capitol Police officers holding the doors open as they walk out after they ransacked congressional offices. There are photos circulating in the social media where people were at Nancy Pelosi's desk with their feet up. They stole her mail. They left notes. There were many of these white terrorists that had zip ties with the intention of perhaps kidnapping and in doing more harm to lawmakers. The chanting outside was that they were going to hang Mike Pence, and there were nooses on the trees outside of the U.S. Capitol. This is what devolved on Wednesday. And so, you know, I don't, we can cut back to that video whenever anybody wants, or if anybody has any particular. That's like a 20-minute clip of everything that, you know, they took from either inside or from outside of the U.S. Capitol. So if anybody wants anything they want to be brought up, just let me know. But let's start with Wednesday. What we anticipated was going to be an extra long certification because there were so many objections from both a member of the House, and they had gotten senators to sign on, including her name Loeffler from Georgia, to object to the results. And they started with Arizona. They got as far as Arizona before the mob outside broke in and just stopped everything. So let's start with I know that we all were talking that day, but like your initial thoughts when you saw that I have to say I was expecting something to happen, but when I was watching on C-SPAN, when you see on C-SPAN a bunch of people with Trump flags and Confederate flags marching to the U.S. Capitol, I have to say, I was like, what the fuck is going on? So initial thoughts to, like, as you were watching this insurrection unfold live on TV. We'll start with Beacon. What were your initial thoughts?
You know, I am a nerd, as you and I have talked about that. I think that we were probably one of only a handful of people that were intending to watch the proceedings without any expectation that it would end up the way it did. So I was happy to just watch the politicking of all the different senators and congresspersons being like, "Oh, this is horrible. This is election rigging, blah blah blah." And I thought it was just going to be, something simple like that. But as soon as the Confederate flag got to the second story of the Capitol, out there on the balcony, it's like, oh, okay, so yeah, a lot of shit is going to go down, and they have every intention of causing a lot of trouble, and they did, and it was just, I don't know if anyone else had this reaction, but I was not necessarily enjoying everything, but I also wasn't surprised. I wasn't like horrified. It was more somewhat of um, a morbid amusement about what was happening, just because, seeing what the natural culmination of the past 4 or 5 years of all of the rhetoric that Trump and all the other Republicans have spewed, it almost seemed natural that it would come to this, that they would want to storm the castle, that they would want to do other things. Hell, I wouldn't be surprised if after Biden moves into the White House, they try to storm the White House, It just seems like a natural progression of the type of mentality, the type of, headspace that a lot of these Trump people are in, that it is, yeah, it just seemed like it would naturally come to this. And so, I'll be honest, I'm not opposed to there being a revolution in America. I'm not opposed to there being a tearing down of systems and institutions and norms. I didn't want it to be like this. I was hoping that it would be more beneficial to wider swaths of people, whether it be, a revolution to try to go for universal health coverage, or to end capitalism, or something like that. That's kind of what I was hoping for. But people being pissed off that their preferred candidate is not going to be in the White House and their lives are going to be totally fine over the next 4 years, that's so boring. It's such a boring, quote unquote, revolution that they were trying to start.
Yeah, I think that it was definitely. I don't know that I was shocked, because the caliber of folks that go to Trump rallies, like, you can expect that they're going to be ruckus, but also that there's a lot of former military, police officers, and then all of these just
Not
like
just
gun
former, but current.
enthusiasts. Yeah, just gun enthusiasts, and so I think that I was like, okay, like, it's getting serious and it's getting dicey. But I think what really irked me was that there were Confederate flags, like, just raised in the Capitol again, and that was just like probably the most disturbing thing I saw all day. Yeah, Greg, what were your initial
Well, you say
thoughts?
again, like it wasn't even raised during the Civil War.
Yeah,
Like that was a first.
yeah, and I don't. Well, I'm not gonna say it, but the last time that the U.S. Capitol was breached was in the 1800s by the British, and so
Right.
it took a bunch of domestic terrorists basically to walk through the front door. The amount of memes that I have seen since Wednesday about how all these countries that have beef with the U.S. just had to walk through the front door.
Yeah.
And that's really what happened. And we'll talk about the disparities in the treatment of these white terrorists and people of color and various other scenarios. But Greg, what were your initial reactions when you saw what was going on?
I think there was a mix of stuff. There was just this feeling of just being horrified that we're watching this unfold in the year of Beyonce's 2021, and it's like, I think I joked with you, and I
It's
was
not
like,
2021 yet. It is. It's December 41st today. It's not 2021 yet.
like we are like, because I think that a lot of people anticipated that it was going to go on, like the counting of the votes was going to drag on throughout the night because of the objections, and we were just going to hear them just repeating the same old narrative throughout the day. The protest was going to be happening outside and around. Actually breaching the cap, like storming the building. And I think I joked that, like, I'm down for some really crazy, crazy things. Like, I'm a little impressionable, so I can, get out there and I don't think that I would have ever wanted to storm the Capitol. Like, I think that would have just, for me, I'd be like, whoa, 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 guys, let's pull back this idea. But again, it's the caliber of people who attend his rallies. And I think that a lot of times, so they're saying this, oh, this isn't us. No, that's exactly who you all are. And I think a lot of us and all of us have always known that these are the type of people that you all are. The opportunity may not have really presented itself to show you all, for them to show who they were, but this was the perfect opportunity for that. I mean, we've seen it at some of the rallies and how they've wrestled people out and how, you know, they've attacked counter protests at the rallies. And that was just like a really, really, really small glimpse of who they are and the amount of rage that they have within them. And this was just us seeing it on full display. This was us just seeing all of that just spill all out into the street, both literally and figuratively. I think most of his children were on Twitter like, oh no, we are law and order. No. That's just something that you all say. And countering Black Lives Matter and defund the police. That's not something that you all actually practice, particularly as a party. You know, it's something that you all, it's just a political statement that you all make. And as we've seen, you all, like, obviously Blue Lives did not matter on Wednesday to the Trump Republican Party. You know, so I have a really small story and how maybe can't remember the exact year, like I really had the privilege and the honor to stand in the well of the U.S. House to actually stand on the floor, and not being like a staffer, not knowing a staffer, not having like any of that. And it's funny how we got there. I was on a big old group of us. My godmother was living in DC at the time, so like all of her godchildren, her godchildren's children, and some other people went to visit her, and we were on a tour of the U.S. Capitol. One of the guards was really, really abrasive with, I think it was like my nephew and another one of the young boys or something like that. It was like very unprofessional, very abrasive, and all of this stuff. And so we continued with the tour, but I think some of the adults noticed that the younger people were still bothered by that interaction. And so before the tour ended and before we left, we, for lack of better words, was like, pulled a Karen. We was like, we need to see the manager. We need to see whoever is in charge, like, because we needed them to see us resolving this for them, because it was not, like, that interaction wasn't appropriate. And the person who was over them that day was a Black man. He was apologetic about what had happened, and he was like, let me do this for you all. Clearly, this has ruined you all's time. Let me try to make it somewhat better. Let me take you on a VIP tour really quickly. He took us to the floor of the House. So our kids got to stand there on the floor of the House. He took us out on the balcony that overlooked where the inaugurations take place and stuff like that. So we got an amazing tour. But again, it came out of the abrasiveness of a white officer and how he interacted with us there. Like, and so I would have never thought that based on how unprofessional, aggressive, and abrasive he was, that anybody would be able to breach the Capitol in the way that they did on Wednesday. But again, it's that, you know, Black people are Black and brown people are almost always seen as threats, even when they're not, as opposed to their white counterparts, who are rarely, if ever, seen as threats when they're actually being threatening. Like, so even in them being threatening, they're not necessarily seen as threats. And so, as Freddie will tell you, like, when there was just that watching all of that unfold was a lot. You know, because then we also didn't know to what end. Right? Like at the point that you're breaching the Capitol, what is the end? And we have some speculations of what the ends were. You know, they're running around with zip ties. So obviously they were planning to kidnap sitting Congress people. Yeah, Wednesday was a lot for us as a country. Like, and it is exactly who we are. Like, Yeah, people keep saying this isn't who we, no, this isn't who we want to be.
Yeah.
But at the point that 70 something million people voted for a Trump,
Yeah.
like it's really, really hard to say this isn't who we are.
Yeah.
Like you can say that because you're embarrassed that it's being revealed that this is who you are, because you wanted to be able to stand on the pedestal and wave your fingers at Black Lives Matter or everything that took place this summer and say, like, we would have never done that. But the truth is, like, while there is not a comparison, you all are these type of people who would want to kidnap sitting Congress people and hang the vice president of your own party. Like, he is a Republican. Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think let's break it down chronologically, right? So before they even got into joint session, Trump and Don Jr. and all of the fools that were like going to Hawley, all of them were there, and they all really were riling up the crowd. And then he literally told them, like, you have to go and you have to be strong. You can't be weak. You have to show strength. And then he told them you have to go and fight. And then he's like, I'm going to go with you. Don't worry. I got you. I got your back. The president's got your back. He sent this like unruly mob. You can go on Twitter and find tons of videos of people like inside, like amongst themselves at this rally, talking about how they're going to go and they're going to storm and they're going to go inside. Like, they're literally on social media posting these videos. They get there, the joint session starting, and they have to make it through multiple layers of security. And so I want to break down what happened, right? Because I think what you're noting is really important, Greg. Never ever in my lifetime would I ever think that the US Capitol would be overtaken by a group of like unruly white folk. I mean, it would be some group of unruly white folk, but not like this group of unruly white folk. And so, you were gonna say something?
No. I was gonna say, yeah, like this, like I would think that it would have that on some level a lot of this was planned. But absolutely. I would think that there would be a lot more planning.
Absolutely. So
on the level of an Ocean's movie.
Yeah. I think I want to get at that there was, I think that there was amateur hour was happening there. There was like a part of the crowd that was total amateur hour. They were there. They were like, yeah, America. And they were like marching towards the Capitol. But there were people in full tactical gear, in camos, with Kevlar, with like helmets, like wearing body cameras attached to their Kevlar. And so I think that it's really important to note that like this was a concerted effort to take over the Capitol. It wasn't people that were like, oh yeah, let's march over there. Oh yeah, look, we got through the first barrier. Yeah. We can go through the other one.
We're open.
So
yeah, I think that they're.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I mean, there were definitely the people, like as you said, the people that were outfitted in tactical gear and had their zip ties and everything else, and they were prepared. But I think that a lot of them were like, I played Call of Duty. Yeah, I could take over the Capitol. Yeah, let's do this. Like, they don't need to be prepared. They're like, yeah.
Yeah, there were definitely Call of Duty people that were like, oh, I got this.
All the people that were freaking like climbing in the wall are Call of Duty people.
All right, let me pull this up. Let me unmute myself and unmute y'all. So this is a graphic. This is from the Washington Post that shows that the U.S. Capitol was attacked from it was one point where they started, but then once they broke through the first security barrier, they were attacking it from 3 different access points. So the first one, they stormed the barricades at the west side of the Capitol, and then they marched towards the building. The mob started climbing the Capitol from the northwest side, and then this says rioters, but I'm going to call them terrorists. They climbed the scaffolding and they used it to access the second floor and bang on the windows, and then 4 of the rioters pushed past the barricades and entered the building through a door and on the east side. And then once the Capitol Police were so overwhelmed that they just got overtaken. So this was a concerted effort. But the other thing I want to point out is that the Capitol Police was not prepared. They there is some, I don't know what, there's some sort of funny business somewhere that is happening where sorry, Greg, these transition things, I'm gonna get used to this, I swear. But
I'm like, oh.
somewhere there was a concerted effort on behalf of what it looks like law enforcement that was guarding the U.S. Capitol to just let folks in. There are videos on social media of police officers opening the barricades and just letting them in. There are videos of cops taking selfies with the insurrectionists that were inside the building. There are literally videos where there was a woman that was shot, Ashley Barrett was shot, where they were trying to enter the speaker's chamber, or not the speaker's chambers, but the floor to the house. And literally the people are talking, the insurrectionists are talking to the cops, and they're like, listen, we don't want you guys to get hurt, so you guys should just leave. And then the cops just like walk away, and then someone ends up getting shot because they keep trying to storm through. So thoughts on like this unbelievable like they literally walk through the front door. I like, that really gets me. One important thing that I read today, or that I heard today, is that, you know, everybody's like, oh, they were just protesters, that they were making their way and they got caught up in the moment, and they're using words really strategically, like to invoke passion and storming, and like, you know, to make people feel good, and revolutionary acts. And nah, y'all just walk through, and clearly someone was like, no, back up. Not only that, but that if it had been anybody else, mind you, not just people of color, if Russians were outside the U.S. Capitol, there is no way that they would have made it to the U.S. Capitol doors without a show of lethal force. And these folks literally walked through, got up, and then they got in. And so let's start with the failure of the U.S. Capitol Police and every federal agency, because it's the protection of the Capitol is the Capitol Police, but every federal policing agency, all of the alphabet soup of like police military agencies that exist in Washington, D.C., they just let it happen. Who wants to start?
You know, again, I think that it goes back to my earlier statement that whiteness is always seen as non-threatening. And so in my mind, if I understand that there are hundreds of thousands, maybe, of people that are coming to the Capitol, to DC, to protest this, that we're going to be prepared for them. And so I wouldn't necessarily say that I would have been prepared for them to storm the Capitol, because again, I don't know that most of us thought that would happen. But, and again, they would be here in DC. They will be around whatever park they're supposed to be, that we would be in a position to quickly mobilize to wherever this turn up is happening at. And so again, there was no forethought in that. There was no, well, apparently there was, because again, the mayor did ask for, who did she ask? The national, I think there was a National Guard request that was submitted that was denied. But again, that goes to this, they're just coming out to rally for Trump. Like, no big deal. They're not good, you know, no big deal. But they should have anticipated that after what happened the previous night, their first night in town. Like, I don't know if that was their first night, but on Tuesday evening, like all of the stuff that took place Tuesday evening, and they should have been prepared, ready to quickly mobilize. Like, at the point that you saw them storming the Capitol, like, again, had that been any other group of people, the tanks would have been out. Again, well, they don't want the tanks on the DC streets because they're going to tear them up. Be extremely clear. That's right. Anyone else?
Yes. Muriel Bowser's like, please don't bring the tanks out. Congress is already in charge of the budget because we're not a state. But I think that's
on the streets. Had anyone else been heading towards the Capitol?
Yeah, I think that's what would hit me. 4 hours from when it started. 4 hours for them to actually be able to clear the building. for 4 hours, all of these folks had access to congressional offices because everything happened so quickly and they weren't anticipating. People left documents out, computers were unlocked, like offices were literally ransacked. And, you know, there's confidential like information inside of the U.S. Capitol because of the nature of what they do there. And like you can see in many of the videos online and social media, like there are people literally like at desks holding up stuff, like taking pictures of them with their cell phone. And like these are the same folks that were like, they walked into the front door, and then when the National Guard actually showed up and it was time to get rid of everybody, they held a door open and said, okay, have a beautiful night. like go be Muriel Bowser's problem. Like we're good. There's even video of like a fully like riot geared up Metro DC police officer like helping one of these insurrectionists like down the stairs. Like this is absolutely fucking bonkers. There's definitely a disconnection in what was anticipated, and I think that this is deeper than that, right? It's like this like, oh, they're white people, they're going to be pacified, it's going to be okay, they wouldn't cause harm and destruction to one of the most sacred like institutions that stands for their freedom and democracy, and cue the American eagle that's going to fly behind me, like all that shit that like people actually believe to be true. And then once again, some of the most destructive people have been the white folks that walk through the front fucking door. And so I definitely want to point out that there was something happened. And like we've talked about it before here, that a lot of military personnel and a lot of police are supporters of Trump. And so that's why I feel like this was a very calculated, concerted effort, and that there were people inside. I read an article yesterday that was talking to the people of color that were members of the Capitol DC Police. And again, like on the show, we don't stand police officers, like ACAB for life, all of that. But you can tell that they were definitely hurt because they experienced their white counterparts be like, no, like I see you trying to hold that crowd of 50 people in a doorway by yourself with a nightstick, but I'm going to go ahead and like walk away. And like there's accounts of them like literally on the radio, like calling for support, calling for backup. And then after they finally secured the Capitol, there's an interview where a lot of the Capitol police officers that were of color sat in the rotunda and cried because they experienced, I guess, for the first time what it's like for white police officers to abandon you. I don't know. but I'm like, there's definitely some disparity even within the Capitol Police Department that, you know, those white cops were like, come on in. Like, here's this map and like go on ahead, walk in. So that was the first thing that happened, right? There was this big like wave that happened. But let's talk about the difference in how they treated these folks compared to the Black Lives Matter protesters that have been happening since when, I don't even know when that was. I feel like it's been an ongoing issue. But whenever the George Floyd stuff started through now, there are images that are circulating on social media right now of like military officers surrounding the U.S. Capitol in lines in full riot gear. And then like they had like 30 cops, you know. I feel like I saw more police during the funeral escort of the police officer that passed away during the insurrection than I saw at the Capitol that day. Like there was like lines of police office cars lined up, and I'm like, where were y'all on Wednesday? Like what the fuck happened on Wednesday? So now let's talk about the disparity in the treatment of the folks that were at this insurrection on Wednesday versus not just Black Lives Matter protesters, but there have been instances in the U.S. Capitol where they have removed disabled protesters that were outside in the hallways. They removed them from their wheelchairs to get them out of the Capitol. There is a woman that like had mental health, was having a mental health breakdown and like made a U-turn in front of the Capitol, and like the U.S. Capitol Police shot this person. So like there have been many instances in which the U.S. Capitol Police has been aggressive, and like if you blink the wrong way, if you breathe in the wrong direction, like they'll take you down. And so let's talk about the disparity. Beacon, we can start with you. Like what like I mean, it's all bullshit. Like at the end of the day, like that, all of it is bullshit, and like the really racist vitriol that's like ingrained in like everything that has to do with the U.S. But let it we can't just not talk about it. So what were your feelings on
Well,
the disparities in treatment?
well, I mean, it's so crystal clear, and it was also again one of those things that were just absolutely expected because we've known this, right? We've known that there are two different types of responses that law enforcement has when it comes to one type of response towards people of color and all minorities, frankly. When it comes to also, you mentioned um, the protest about healthcare, where you had a lot of disabled and differently abled individuals that were protesting, and the treatment that they received versus the treatment that white people receive. Um, I live in a very like a small suburb, like quiet, all that. When the George Floyd protests, when the BLM protests were happening, there was like a tiny protest of like 30 to 50 people in our neighborhood. And there were tons of helicopters, tons of police cars. Like it was a huge police presence. And it was like a tiny group of people in a very quiet suburb. Like nothing was going to happen. But they had a ridiculously massive and a very quick response. And yet you have the Capitol Police that were just chilling, that were, as you said, taking selfies, that were letting people, like literally letting people in. There was this one video of police literally lining a hallway and just watching as people came through. And a reporter was recording, like, hey, can you let me in? I'm press. They're like, no, we're not allowing anyone in. Literally, as people were walking by the camera and walking by the cops into the Capitol building. It was ridiculous. Um, but again, it's to be expected. We've known this, and I the other aspect that is expected is seeing, especially all the Democrats, all the politicians, all the Democrat voters, and et cetera, being like, well, we still love the police and we still support the police and all that. It's like, so you literally saw that the police were taking selfies with people that were breaking in to the Capitol building and had zip ties and had tasers, and there were freaking bombs. And we're still like, yeah, the police are cool. They're cool. It's like, no, they're only cool to you because you're not afraid of any type of violent recourse that people of color and other minorities have to deal with on a daily basis.
Yeah, I mean, let's also be clear that there was a semi-automatic weapon that was found on the grounds of the Capitol. There were two pipe bombs. There was 11 Molotov cocktails. There were several people with handguns. There were several people with like, it's not, well, it is a weapon because like in the U.S. Capitol, you're not allowed to bring flag sticks in. And there were people with 2x4 flag sticks. There was somebody that had
bags in, like
everything, bags, like everything. Everything. I got more checked when I went into my high school every day than these folks. They like literally walked in with anything they had on their person. So yeah, like it was a full on shit show. Greg, what are your thoughts on the disparities between the way they treated, the insurrectionists and the way they've treated anyone that's ever protested anything anywhere, not just at the U.S. Capitol? That's a thing. Like Beacon was just talking about this like suburban protests and how they were like heavily armed and surrounded. Anywhere on anything you've ever seen on television where you've seen the people that are gathered against the police, like there's a lot of them, and it takes like one chirp from the radio for them to have the SWAT team there and for them to have like hose cannons and rubber bullets and tear gas. And here we were 4 hours at the U.S. Capitol.
Mm-hmm. Also, real quick, I mean, it's not like DC is some like remote frickin' like hick town out in the boonies. It's the seat of government. If they don't, like the full-on FBI and the CIA, they're all headquartered there. Like there is freaking military personnel, there's police personnel, there's FBI, there's CIA. They're very thoroughly staffed. They had the people. They just chose not to. Sorry,
Yeah.
I don't mean to interrupt, Greg.
Yeah, I mean,
No,
for
and
the
I think that's
Lafayette Park clearing, when Trump wanted to go and take a picture with a Bible across the street from the White House, he cleared them in a matter of minutes, and he had military helicopters flying low to get rid of people. So absolutely, like, if I was a foreign country right now, I'd be like, guys, put your guns away. We're just gonna get some fanny packs and we're gonna walk right up the steps. Greg.
Um, no, like to Beacon's point, and that's what is just so confounding about all of this. And I think it will come out. It'll like eventually come out, like all of the failures, like like who stood on the sidelines, who withheld help. Because again, in my mind, you all would have been prepared to mobilize wherever it is that the fires arose due to these quote unquote protests. Like you all would have been somewhere prepared for that. And it shouldn't have taken 4 hours to mobilize. Like in my mind, you would have been like, oh, they're breaching the Capitol. Everybody from everywhere would have been jumping out of trees, like, coming out of storm drains,
Absolutely.
all type of stuff to protect the Capitol building. Like we watched them casually stroll in like it was Applebee's. Like, wait, what did Anderson say? Where did they go? Olive Garden. Like they literally were like
unlimited salad, please.
Unlimited salads in the house chambers tonight. Like, it's when the autopsy of this is done, and we fully understand I absolutely believe that the mayor was prepared for some foolishness, but again, she probably did not have any support on the national level, and as it because it is there was a lot of probably pushback to her, like no, we're not doing that, it's not going to be that type of party. They're just coming out here to have a good time. And in her mind, she probably was like, no, like they're gonna tear up DC. Like I kept saying they're gonna tear up DC tonight. They're gonna tear up DC tonight. I did not expect them to tear up the Capitol building. Like, and maybe like there were people hiding in the tubs in the basement. Like for real, like for hours until you all were able to mobilize. And so like who was on first, who was on second, and who was on third. I'd love to at some point fully understand what people's thinkings were. And so like no one could pick up the phone and say, guys, we need you to send busloads of people now. That now took again 4 hours for them to fully mobilize, get there, clear the building. It's like I just relayed that story about how aggressive this one officer was with with people who had already been through maybe 1 or 2 security checks, who were no threat at all to anything in the building, who were just goofing off. And again, I think a lot of also the standing around that we saw was because at that point there was nothing that they could do from some of the officers' perspectives. Like at this point, like they're probably like they were surrounded. Again, if you pulled up that picture again, they were coming in through all sides of the building. Like that little bitty Capitol Police force was going to be trampled, like for real. It was just really sad to watch. And at some point I stopped watching because I was like, I don't want to watch this, like for real.
Yeah, and there's already been, the sergeant at arms, which is responsible for like overseeing the security of the Capitol, or the chambers at least, resigned. The chief of the Capitol Police is also resigning, and I'm sure that once Congress is back, or right shortly after they come back, that they're going to launch a full investigation and name a committee that's going to look into all of the breakdowns. And hopefully we'll get real answers, right? Because a lot of times I feel like people are like, oh, well, they just anticipated it. But there's already reports that said that many of the federal agencies had offered up their support, and that, like, I agree with you. I think that the DC mayor was like, oh, no, we need to be ready, y'all. like we need to be ready. And that a lot of people were not. And then the other report that's out that hasn't been confirmed yet is that the National Guard did, like, they were watching TV too. So the National Guard was like, yo, y'all okay? Like, do you all need us to come in? And that they continuously denied their request to come in and help. And then the other report that's unconfirmed is that it wasn't actually Trump that called in and allowed the National Guard to go in and help. That Pence had to go ahead and do it. And the other thing I think that's important for Pence, and I think one of the reasons why Pence is so pissed at Trump right now is because Pence's family was there. Like, his wife was there, his kids were there, and so Trump is here at this rally, like, America, go get him. And and then just leave Pence is there, stuck in the building with no way to fucking get out.
So he knows what it's like to be threatened by Trump.
Absolutely. I think it's the first time that he may have experienced the full wrath of this crazy sociopath that we've allowed to have control of all this shit for 4 years. So let's move into the next part of it, right? So rally incites, insurrectionists get through the barriers, the police are not prepared. They get in, they ransack everything, 5 people have died, 3 of them from medical issues that happened while they were on there. One of them was shot, and then a Capitol police officer was hit in the head with a fire extinguisher and then died later from the head trauma. So 5 people died. So we're there 4 hours later, right? They clear everyone, and then all of these white lawmakers have had, it has finally hit them after 4 years. They're like, oh no, we cannot support these objections. We can't go. And they decide, okay, we're going to get through this. We're going to get through the counts. We're going to certify the elections, except for a select few. And so now let's move into the continuous idiocy of a lot of these Republican lawmakers who, even after they witnessed Trump incite this and then allowed it to happen for so long, and then when he finally bowed to pressure, I'm not going to play the video. I thought about playing the video clip, but he's so fucking ridiculous and he's so full of lies. But he basically comes on a short, cell phone recorded video, it felt like, and he's outside in the garden of the White House, and he's like, my people, I love you, you're special, go home. And that was his response.
Proof of life video.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was continuing to feed this lie that it was stolen.
Yes.
So he couldn't help himself. He couldn't help himself to say, guys, this isn't it. This isn't the way that we should do this. He had to also pepper it with, I know why you all are mad. I'm mad too because they stole from us.
Yeah. He's I get it. I get it. I get why you're there and why you're in Nancy Pelosi's office with your feet on the desk. I get it. I get it. But please go home. that was.
But what's funny is if this was in an action movie where the president was wanting to signal to his followers to urge them on, there would be some kind of he would be saying no, stop, but his eye blinks would be Morse code saying good job, guys. Yes. But this time he just flat out said it. It's just real life is it's literally too implausible for fiction at this point.
Yeah.
And I don't believe that probably wasn't the first take. that there was probably a whole bunch of other things, and that was the best one, and that was the one that was the one that they was like, okay, guys, let's just put this one out because
I mean,
the
The
other
first
one was the one
the first take
out.
was like, "Hey, you guys better find Pence and deal with them." And they're like, no, we can't have that. We can't have that.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, he's so full of himself, right? And he's like all about vanity that you're absolutely right. He's probably like, oh, let's go to the Roosevelt room. No, it's too dark and drabby in here. And he probably had him all over the White House filming these little clips, trying to find like how to continue
Okay.
inside his followers.
But
It
who
was a
among
mess.
us has not posted photos on Twitter and has tried to find the right lighting in their house, keep on doing retakes?
Absolutely. That was him, except he has like a crew of media, like professionals and aides that are following him around the White House with like a cell phone on a tripod. It was a true mess. And so they arrive back, right? And I'm gonna hopefully I can play this graphic and it works. Unmute me. Okay, so these are the 147 Republicans who continued to object even after they were inside of the Capitol for 4 hours. And this is from PBS NewsHour. Even after they were in there for 4 hours, hiding inside of bathtubs, like in like makeshift, like putting chairs under doors to try to stay safe. These are the fools that like were like, oh no, we're still gonna object. So they came back from the recess, from the insurrection. They came back, they got through Arizona, right? And then on the Senate side, they're like, okay, they tried to negotiate it down, but they weren't able to stop the Pennsylvania objection. So they got through the objection of Arizona. They did the vote. They came back in joint session, and then they got through a bunch of them, and then finally they got back to Pennsylvania, and then of course there was an objection, and then we're there in debate. The Senate got through it relatively quickly, but then on the House side there was a lot more debate, and it wasn't until like 1:30 in the morning, 2:30 in the morning that they finally were like, okay, we're done debate. So now let's talk about how these idiot lawmakers continued to object and also continue to like encourage and fan the flames of these people. So there's a big event coming up. I don't know if everybody knows, but on January 20th, there's going to be a new guy in town. And so I think that like they're still stoking and playing to this base of Trump loyalists. And we'll talk a little bit about how they're starting to break with him too after he kind of conceded. But when they came back and Loeffler rescinded her objection to Arizona, I was like, okay, maybe we're gonna get somewhere. But then they continued, and then they got to Pennsylvania, and so thoughts on these like idiots that are just like, I'm still gonna waste everyone's time in meaningless debate so that we can arrive to a vote where the majority is gonna say no, and then we're gonna uphold the results. And also, like, maybe, well, not maybe. Let's talk about how they got from 4 years of this nonsense, and until their lives were being threatened and they were trapped in the U.S. Capitol, and it was clear that Trump was like, I'm going to play this out as long as I can so I can watch on TV, that they were like, fuck this guy. And so, Beacon, you want to start?
Yeah, it's interesting, like, imagining what the calculus that they were doing behind the scenes to determine if they were going to continue objecting or if they were just going to let it pass. Like Kelly Loeffler, she just lost her Senate race. It makes sense that she wasn't going to put up a fight, right? Just go quietly, go peacefully, right? But then all the other people that continue their objections, namely Hawley, Cruz, and whatnot, they probably figured, you know what? I can still ride out the Trump wave to get me reelected in another 2, 4, 6 years, however many it is, right? I think that they just realized that, you know what, I'm going to double down, go all in on this fan base and hope that they can continue to get me elected, which that's cruel and that's cynical, but that is also just politics. Like that, I would not at all be surprised if that was the conversations that they were having. I mean, I think that there is definitely a group of those politicians who legitimately believe that the election was stolen, that the election was rigged, whatever. There's that group of people. Then there's the group of people that are like, I know this was an honest election, but I have to oppose it to appeal to my voters, to appeal to my base so I can get reelected, so I can stay in power and keep my position, blah, blah, blah. And that group of people, they have seen everything in the past 4 years. They've seen all the things that he said. They've seen Charlottesville. They've seen this. Like, none of it has been new. There's not, like, this isn't anything that's inconsistent with everything else that has happened in the past 4 years. So I don't know. I'm kind of rambling and I'm kind of getting down a rabbit hole now. But it's just not at all surprising that the people that doubled down on it continued. And fuck them. I don't know.
So what do you think of
I don't
these
know how to end
calls?
that.
There are these calls to expel them, right, from the House and from the Senate. I doubt that they're going to get anywhere. But what do you think about calls to expel them? I think that there's so much fucking formality in how we govern here. Like, if you actually watch proceedings, like watching them, like the gentlewoman shall, like there was almost a fist fight on the House floor during the Pennsylvania debate.
I yield my time.
Yeah, and Nancy Pelosi's up there, and she's literally got her little like gavel in her hand, and she's like, "The gentleman will suspend," and I'm like, "Girl, like." What are you all doing? And so I doubt it'll get anywhere, but what do you think of these calls to, like, rein them
I
in or kick
support
them
that
out?
call, and especially if we look at Pennsylvania. And so, like, if we look at it in this aspect, is that nothing was going to change. Like, so objecting to Pennsylvania was not going to change the outcome of this certification. After everything that you and your colleagues have been through that day, we are now at somewhere around, I can't remember when Pennsylvania came up, but we're probably around 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night. There's 2 hours each. The objections allow for 2 hours worth of debate. And so in your mind, you say, I am still going to put my colleagues through this. I am still going to force them to go through debate for another 2 hours after everything that we have been through throughout the day, just so I can make a point. And that's all the objection was for you to make a point that didn't have to be made because they've been made already. Like, again, that this, it's not like you were introducing new points for Pennsylvania, or that there was something different that was going to come out during that debate that had not already been out before. And so, again, you continue to push this narrative and to force this conversation and to this use of this time that didn't have to take place. And so you really didn't care not only about your colleagues, but about this institution, the American people who are literally watching this. Well, I'm gonna take that back, because you probably care about your constituents who are supporting this craziness. But and so, yeah, I don't think they either expelled or they shouldn't be seated in committee. But there should be something that says you were wrong, and this is how we're holding you accountable for that wrong. But again, I don't think it's going to go anywhere.
Yeah, I wouldn't hold your breath. I'm not going to hold mine either.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to go anywhere.
Yeah, I feel like something should happen too, but I doubt it. There's sorry. So we're at the vote. Surprise, surprise! At the end of the night, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris still won. Which was what was expected. And so they vote, they certify, right, and then immediately we move into the aftermath, right? People are like now calling for heads to roll, all that nonsense. And then we move into impeaching the president. They didn't want to impeach him. They said that they believe Mike Pence should invoke the 25th Amendment, which is if he and the majority of the cabinet believe that the president's unfit for office, they can submit a letter to Congress and Congress can say yay. And if they don't, then they're calling for his resignation. And then if not resign, that they're going to introduce one article of impeachment tomorrow. And they are moving ahead with it. I just read an article right before we came on that Nancy Pelosi is going to introduce tomorrow a resolution to try to force Mike Pence to invoke the 25th Amendment. And if it's a no-go, that they're gonna introduce articles of impeachment. So we're there, right? And so like, now these same 147 idiots that were still like wasting everyone's time are like, they're the page turners. That's what I call them. Like, it's time to turn a new page. Let's unify. Let's come together. Let's heal the wounds of our country and all that fucking nonsense. But just a night ago, you were like on the floor wasting everyone's time with these like ridiculous lies and allegations of voter like fraud and election fraud. And so now let's talk about where we're presently at, right? Which is a few things could happen. They can actually invoke the 25th Amendment and remove him from office, which I highly doubt will happen. They will introduce an article of impeachment, but even if they introduce it, there's no way that they're going to be able to get through it before Joe Biden is inaugurated. So it'll be after he leaves the presidency that they would be able to take it off, when all of the chambers, all of the branches will be under Democratic control, or he can resign. And the only way that I can see that happening is if he works out a deal with Pence where he resigns if Pence pardons him. That's the only way that I can see resignation happening. So, where are y'all at? Are y'all ready? I wonder if they'll let us walk through the White House front door. Where are y'all at? Well, what do you all think is going to go down? What do you think is going to happen? We'll start with you.
I mean, representing the cynical side of things, like, I don't think that anything is going to really happen. I mean, I understand that, they're going to do the vote tomorrow, and, this is my opportunity to do my weekly shitting on Nancy Pelosi, but her initial response was like, I think that Pence should invoke the 25th Amendment, and then we'll talk about impeachment because I guess some of my members want to talk about impeachment. Like, it was a very soft, like, response. And so I really don't think that they're going to go for it. I mean, you already have a whole bunch of Democrat politicians that are like, it's the past, let's just move on, let's turn a page, blah, blah, blah. And it's just, but I also don't know if I necessarily want them to do anything, because they didn't do anything the past 4 years. Like, I understand that, obviously he was impeached, like the impeachment proceedings went through, but that took a long time for that to happen, and now all of a sudden they're getting more of a backbone and they're like, yeah, let's impeach him 2 weeks before he's out of office. I just don't think that it actually does anything more than virtue signaling to their voters, to their base, be like, yeah, we're the party that stood up for morals, that stood up for institutions, that stood up for decency. But it's toothless when it's within the last 2 weeks of his presidency. So I really don't care if they do anything. I think it would be bold as hell if Pence actually invokes the 25th Amendment. I don't think that he's going to do it. I think that he's too locked in with Trump at this point. So yeah, I'm very curious to see if anything happens. I'm not expecting anything to happen. So, we'll see how it turns out.
Yeah, I think I've read a lot of articles, and there have been a lot of people that are on the inside that know Pence and former Pence staffers that have like flat out said he doesn't have the balls to do it. Like, there are literally people that have like come out and said that they don't think he has the courage, that they've never seen him stand up to Trump, that they don't think that he will actually invoke. And then the little blurbs that have leaked from the vice president's office, well, one is that he hasn't talked to Trump since Wednesday, right? Like, I wouldn't want to talk to the person that almost got me like beat up either. But that he doesn't feel like that's the right avenue. And so I think that the only reason why I want something to happen is for these reasons. One is that he gets a pension if he just like takes off. Like, he's gonna get a pension that we pay him. It's like $200,000 for life. Melania gets like $20,000 a year for life. They get a Secret Service escort. They get like $150,000 a year for staffers. You know, they're gonna this library, this monstrosity of a library, is gonna get built somewhere on our. You know, we're gonna get footed with the bill. The only and they would introduce a resolution at the same time that impeached them that would say that he can no longer run for like any like elected office. And so those are the reasons why I'm like, because otherwise I feel like he's been emboldened by all these people, and he's like, they were willing to storm, like they were willing to like break into the Capitol for me. Hell yeah, I'm gonna run in 2024. And so those are the reasons why I want something to happen. But just like you, like my cynicism is like, this is gonna be a bunch of like pomp and circumstance, and then at the end of the day they're gonna be like, let's just be thankful that Joe's in the White House because he's the savior and everything's gonna be great. And we'll be here again for many moons during the Biden administration talking shit about him. Greg, what are your thoughts?
No, I support impeachment for the same reasons that you just listed. Like, I believe that he should not benefit from benefit in a post presidency. I think that he and for all intents and purposes leave with what he came with. Like, at this point, and that's how I feel, and that's why one of the only reasons why I think that they absolutely should go down this route. But I think for me, the other piece of that is to put the senators on record that they are still supporting him. If nothing else, like this is your final moment now to dislodge from his asshole. Like, this is it. Like, you have the opportunity now. Because if nothing else bothered you over the last
from his asshole.
like if nothing else bothered you over the last 4 years, like, because again, they should have voted to impeach him last year, but this is the opportunity. Like, this is the final record of where you stand after what just happened. After you, like, because again, like, he absolutely feels emboldened. Like, he's like, oh, like, these are my people. Like, my people are going to go down with the ship. And so I want to see it. If for nothing else, I want to see the Cruzes and all of them vote to continue to support him. For no other reason, I want to see them go on record saying he's not as bad. That they will hopefully pay for that at some point. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd say Lisa Murkowski has come out, Tom Tooney has come out and said that they would support removing him from office, although they believe that he should do it through resignation. They think that'll be the best and like the only way to continue unifying the country. A lot of Republicans are saying that it would destroy us, and like, you know, because the country is so put together right now as it is, it would destroy us if we went through a second impeachment. But the last few things that I want to talk about is that, so finally, he came on TV in a very scripted, awkwardly videotaped another speech in which he finally concedes, and all his peeps that he had their back and he was going to march to the Capitol with them, he changed the tune, and all of a sudden he's like, you will be punished to the fullest extent of the law if I don't issue a like broad pardon before you get out of office, which he has the power to do.
I thought about this the other night. I was like, he's the type though to be leaving.
Yeah. Like January 20th at like 11:29. He's just like sign. He absolutely is. And you know,
they were doing it for him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they have started arresting folks through social media posts. Like the FBI is able to figure out where people are so quickly, and all of a sudden they're asking people on social media for help. But the arrests have started. But he finally kind of conceded. He didn't mention Joe Biden by name, but he did say that the electoral results were certified, and like that's it. A new administration will start, and that he's now going to start the peaceful transition of power after his insurrection at the Capitol. But so like those are the final thoughts. And the last thing that I want to throw in there is that all of these Republican senators and Republican like members of the House are like, we never saw this coming. This was a shock. Like, I can't believe that this has happened. Not in my America. And so let's talk about how this is America. I want to be absolutely clear that this is the America where a group of white terrorists can walk through the front door of the US Capitol and overtake it without mass casualties, without mass arrests, and that at the end, when they were done trotting around for 4 hours, they held the door open and they said, thank you, come again. And like that was it. And so let's talk about how this is America. This is not just Donald Trump America. This all existed before this. And so let's talk about how there's this false narrative going around that this is like shocking. This is the first time that they've seen this. Like they can't believe this is happening. And this quote that this is not who we are. Beacon, we'll start with you.
I mean, as you said, it's
Beacon froze.
this is
Oh, there you are. You're back. No?
Can you hear me? Hey, can you?
Yes. No.
Okay. Anyways, as I was saying, I mean this, this is America. This is who we are. This is like the country's history. It's frankly going to be the country's future as well. Every single time anything horrible happens in this country, whether it's a black man getting murdered or children in cages at the border or an insurrection at the Capitol, every single time you hear politicians on both sides that are like, this is the darkest hour. I never thought this could possibly happen in America. It's like, y'all were founded as a country on the murdered backs of indigenous people, stealing indigenous land, that you built the country with slave labor that lasted for a long ass time, and then you had Jim Crow that only ended like 50 years ago, 50 some odd years ago. This is the country. Like, what the fuck are you talking about saying that you never thought this could possibly happen in this country, or it's the darkest hour or whatever? It is just incredibly clear that we live in different countries than a whole lot of other people. That you have white people, that you have politicians that just do not live in the same country that minorities live in, that oppressed people live in. Like, it's just two different countries, and I don't know if it'll ever become one single country, because that means that you've got a lot of people that in the country are going to have to see the country for what it really is. And it's a lot easier to just think that the country is like the way it is in the West Wing, to think that it's this beacon of hope all across the world, to think that you're spreading democracy, you're feeding babies, blah, blah, blah. It's a lot easier to think all about all the good stuff, but not see what is literally happening on a daily basis in the streets of this country. And so, of course, you have all these different representatives and House members, what have you, that are shocked, and it's because they haven't seen what's been going on, because they've chosen not to see what's been going on. They've chosen not to think about the repercussions of their actions, of their rhetoric, by supporting Trump, by inciting and encouraging the base. They've chosen not to think about the consequences. They've chosen not to of what could possibly happen when you've got a president that has been telling people for years that you have the press is the enemy, people that are against us are the enemy, blah, blah, blah. What do you do with enemies? You fight back against them. So, of course, they would want to fight back against what they perceive as the enemy. So it's it's ridiculous. And hopefully at some point in time, all these people will finally see the truth and see the light. But I'm not at all optimistic about it. They don't want to see it.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't think that this is. There's no way you didn't see this in the last 4 years, but there's no way you've ever seen this in your like lifetime, unless you're a white person who has privilege, right? Like you may have never experienced this, but like as a person who's been watching politics and who is like a geek about politics, like I'm like, oh, everything seems really unstable, and like at any moment, given the right set of circumstances, pow, like shit can just hit the fan and it can become explosive. Greg, what are your thoughts on like this is who we are and all that rhetoric that's going on online?
No, I think it's absolutely who we are. Um, I remember doing the Obama era. Like, so I used to be a member of Trinity United Church, and I remember like we had to do bomb and safety drills at church. So so this is exactly who we are as a country. Like, make no mistake about it, we are an extremely violent country. Like we were getting active bomb threats from white Republicans. I'm just going to say that. And so, like, I don't think, again, most of us, Black and brown people, are actually shocked that it rose to that level. I think we just have never seen it necessarily rise to that level. But in the back of our minds, we've always been like, oh, no, we could like really see something terribly happening. I think I also want to push back on this narrative that a lot of people think that that the Republican Party is this party of like old white people. Like, there were a lot of young people out there on Wednesday. There were a lot of like all of those people who were scaling the buildings. Like, and so like this
some of them unsuccessfully. Some of them unsuccessfully.
We'll have to contend with this for years to come. Like, and so like this is just, I think it just showed a lot of people who wanted to claim that we were better than this isn't who we are, that no, this is really who we are. And if this wasn't who we are, we definitely have the potential to be this. And so again, we will have to contend with this for a while now, for some time to come. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I'm absolutely in agreement. Like, if you didn't see this when armed gunmen like surrounded the Michigan state legislature, if you didn't see this when there was a group of like an organized group of people that were planning to kidnap the Michigan governor because of COVID restrictions, if you didn't see this at the many rallies in which Trump incited racist fears, if you didn't see this at Charlottesville, if you didn't see this during the many instances in which Black people have been murdered at the hands of police officers, then you have not had your eyes open your entire life as an adult. Mm-hmm. And so this is really who we are. Like, there should be no surprise that this racist like experience exists in the US. And whether it will change, it's definitely not happening during Biden's administration. It's definitely not happening there. Who knows what the next 4 years will bring, and who knows what that I'm viewing the Biden administration as a placeholder. Like, it's going to be 4 years of like probably nothing. It's going to be a placeholder for what really is going to happen in 2024. All of these people who have, especially right now, placed themselves, his name is skipping my mind. Is it Hawley from Missouri, the senator who has like aspirations to
Yeah.
run in 2024. Like there's a picture of him with his fist raised outside at the insurrectionists at the Capitol, and like he is positioning himself to take over Trump's fan base, because that's what they are. They're his fans. They're not really his followers. They're just fans of him, and they're fans that he fans the same racist flames that they do, either privately or openly. And so this is the country that we live in, and in 2024, that's when I feel like the real shit's gonna go down. Either we're gonna get another Republican candidate like Hawley, who's gonna bring us right back to like Trump times, or who knows what. But I don't anticipate anything happening in the next 4 years. Joe Biden or Kamala Harris have shown us that, and all of their or some of their administration nominations, I'm like, okay, maybe, but like other people like Mayor Garland, who he just named to be the U.S. Attorney General, are nominated a centrist. That's why the Obama administration named him, because he's a centrist, and he thought that he would appease Republicans and the Republicans would vote for him. So I have a news flash for everyone out there.
And Democrats get off on that shit.
Democrats
get off on like, oh, we chose a centrist for our cabinet. We're so we're reaching across the aisle, blah blah blah. Like,
yeah, they're like centrist Democrats. Isn't this sexy? We're introducing like a centrist U.S. Supreme Court nominee, and I'm like, isn't every other U.S. Supreme Court member right now a centrist? Like, why are we giving them more? So I don't think anything will happen. This is who we are. I think that the events that happened on Wednesday were shameful, but I think that like all it did was put on a show for the rest of the world, which is what Trump likes to do. He likes to put on a really good show, and like a lot of people are saying this was the season finale to the Trump administration, and like what a way to go out. And we'll see what next week brings.
It might be the serious finale of the American Empire.
It's true. We'll see what happens, and don't worry, U.S. Capitol Police. We took lots of notes on how to get in, which is apparently just walking through the front door.
Yeah, like is it a red cap mandatory, or is that just a suggestion?
That's right. How many Trump flags does my party have to mount an insurrection? That's it, folks. I hope that everyone is well. Please remember to stay safe as much as possible. Stay 6 feet apart. Wear your masks. Don't go out if you don't have to. We'll be here next week with Lord knows what. But that's it for us. Have a good night. And thank you all for your time, your labor, and your energy tonight. We'll see you all next week. Have a good night, everyone.
Night.